Louis Patrone back with the Key West Legal Hour. Before the break, I was getting into money in Congress. What I'm talking about now, Congress, we're broke, they're not helping the people. I'm going to show you examples, 4 real examples of how Congress takes care of themselves and screws up with money and forgets about the people. As an introduction, there are 2 bad things that have happened that we all have to be aware of. The first is that the median average income for a family has fallen in the last 5 years. That means we're making less and less money. We all know that. And while the cost of goods goes up like groceries. Also, last week, the House of Representatives, Republican-controlled, voted to cut out $40 billion rather, I'm sorry, $40 billion worth of food stamps, okay, over the next 10 years. Well, this doesn't make sense to me because 47.5 million people in the United States, okay, are on food stamps. You heard me, 47.5 million people. Under President Obama, in the last 5 years, that figure has gone up 13 million. It was actually around, I don't know, 32 million when he took office. It's increased. Maybe it's his fault, maybe it isn't. I'm not into that right now. But it's increased, and it's on the increase because less and less people have enough money to get along, all right? And what's happening is the rich, the 1%, are getting richer, and the poor, that 99%, they have less and less money. The 99 can't grow anymore unless we take some of the 1%ers over on our side. Rich against poor, the eternal battle. You know, we say, well, we get along, what's going to happen? Well, things have to improve. Because if they don't improve, all over the world today, there is a cry for equality, got to have a job, got to feed my family. What happened in Cairo, in Egypt? What has happening in North Africa? What has happened in Turkey? What has happened in Cyprus, for example? These people are upset. And money's at the basis of everything. And when they're upset, they go to the streets and they protest. And a silent, quiet, respectable protest all of a sudden turns into violence. Don't think it can't happen here. I'm not saying it's going to happen. It don't look like it. But you never know a year or 2 from now because they just keep building this wall up of beating the people down. I'm talking they build this wall up, meaning Congress. Okay. By the way, this bill knocking off $40 billion of food stamps didn't even have a public hearing. Did you hear me? No public hearing. They didn't go before some committee and let people come in and say, hey, this is good, this is bad. Balance the budget. That was the cry. Screw the people. Now let me tell you what these people in Congress do, all right, which we don't know about. They spend money foolishly. They spend taxpayer dollars, our dollars, foolishly. Example number 1. Did you know if you're a member of the United States Senate and you die while in office, your wife gets a check, okay? She gets a check for a year's salary, $174,000 as a death benefit. This came to my attention recently because of Senator Frank Lautenberg. He was a good Democratic senator for I don't know how many years from New Jersey, a very liberal man. He left an estate, by the way, of $56.8 million. $56.8 million. But we got to give his wife, because we always do it. There's no law authorizing this, by the way. But what they did in the Senate, they added onto a spending bill a rider, which they said they would never do any more of these riders, the Republicans, for $174,000, payable to the widow, because this was a time-honored practice. No law authorizing it, no hearings, just for widows of senators. Well, the $174,000 isn't a lot of money, but they cut $40 billion from people who need food stamps, and they're giving it to a widow who's got an estate of $56.8 million. And they also want to do away with Obamacare. People don't have medical. These guys get free medical in the United States Senate, the best in the world. They want to take Obamacare. They want to take affordable health care away from people who need it. Well, that 174, it's not a lot of money, but it's something. And it should be open and people understand because they shouldn't be doing it. That's simple, especially with Senator Lautenberg's widow. This is going to blow your mind, what I am going to share with you next. We, the United States, we, the taxpayers, are supporting banks to this day in this country. The Huffington Post, a reliable news source, a reliable newspaper, ran an article on this week. Do you know, because I learned, the banks in this country, I'm not talking stimulus money now, get 3% of every tax dollar. 3% out of every dollar of taxes paid goes to the banks. It's a subsidy. You know how we subsidize the farmers and we subsidize the airline industry. We subsidize everybody to keep them going, keep them in business. And what's the subsidy for? It's for research. The subsidy is for research. I searched and I searched and I couldn't find what the research is the banks are doing. All I know is for years they're getting a 3% subsidy and it's for research. But I don't know what the research is and I can't find a research report. We got a little more here. This 3% that the banks are getting, this is not stimulus money. Every year this is a gift. $83 billion a year. $83 billion a year. That is, the Huffington Post said, that's $722 per family. Every family in this country could use another $722. Now, America's 5 wealthiest banks, I'm talking about the big boys, are J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, Citicorp, Wells Fargo, and Goldman Sachs. Do you know of the $83 billion? These, the 5 wealthiest banks in the United States, their subsidy totals 3/4 of the $83 billion. 3/4 of it. I don't understand, and it was even the worst thing this article said, if the banks did not get this 3% subsidy, they would have no profit. The banks that survived, the banks that caused the recession in 2007, 2008, got stimulus taxpayer dollars, have now survived, still aren't doing their jobs in the way they should loan money, but are making money by working with each other. If they didn't get this 3%, they wouldn't be profitable. Wouldn't be profitable. Which now brings me to, we all know, they're paying them, the big banks, the big boys, are paying on Wall Street, are paying themselves $20 and $40 million a year bonuses on top of a $10 or $15 million salary. Where's this money coming from for the bonuses? This money's coming from the 3% subsidy on the tax dollar. They're not supposed to need this money, and the American people don't know they're getting this money. This is a disgrace. And it's further a disgrace because this whole thing was authorized by who? The Congress of the United States. Now, that's got to aggravate you. This is what I'm going to share with you now. It's funny, but more aggravating. I'm only speaking of the Senate of the United States now. And I'm not necessarily picking on them. They're Democratic today. But this is what the Senate has done wrong. I'm talking about the senators of the United States have their own barbershop. Yes, government-owned, operated barbershop. Back in the early 1800s, the Congress at that time decided they should have their own barbershop. I don't know why. So they had a barbershop. And that's been a tradition. Everything's a tradition, by the way, that's continued till today. In 1979, things were getting a little tight. If you recall, we had a recession back then, too. And these are the Carter days, high interest rates, like 21, 22%. The House of Representatives said, we're not going to do this anymore. We're out of the barbershop business. We don't want free haircuts. But the Senate of the United States, they said, no, we want to keep this custom. They get manicures, too, by the way. But we'll pay now. We'll pay $3.50 for a haircut, and we'll pay $18 for a manicure. Nice guys. Nevertheless, this barbershop, by the way, it's called the Senate Hair Care Services. Senate Hair Care Services. All 100 senators use it. loses $500,000 a year, every year. They run in the red $500,000. Our taxpayer dollars have to go in to bring it up to snuff. Over the last 15 years, it's lost $5.25 million. Their own private barbershop. We pay to cut their hair, okay? The barbers who work there get set salaries. We're going to break. Stay with me. This is funny, isn't it? I'll be back.